kind of let's do some quick intros across the board. With me, we have Hetal Patel from iHeart. We're going to do it much quicker. President of Advertising Intelligence Insights, the brain behind how brands understand the power of sound. Former clinical psychologist turned media strategist, and over 2 decades of marketing intelligence. Hetal turns data into stories that move people and move brands, help shape strategy, and she's known for helping partners like Innova see the benefits of how audio and media will shape and scale. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. Really looking forward to our time together.
And then with over 2 decades of experience, is Christine Hess from Mynt Agency, Director of Account Strategy. She leads performance-driven podcasts.
You go ahead. Yes, I'll go get them. Go ahead.
Okay. Streaming audio, cross-channel media, expertise in podcast advertising, host-read endorsements, dynamic ad insertion, yield optimization. If you can do it in podcasting, Christine has done it and figured out how to do it. And in her spare time, she teaches yoga and is excellent at that as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, we can hear. All right, look at that. Thank you. Thank you.
I think we were feeling the FOMO. You guys were all wearing it. And I was like, why do we not get the cool tech?
All right. So, and me, I'm Jim Ballas, the GM of Measurement, Magellan AI. We're here to talk about measurement. We're here to talk about planning. We're here to talk about media. And I think the key thing is we're all in the space. We all do a lot, but there are so many things happening in singular bifurcated ways. And we're trying to change that from a planning perspective, from an optimization perspective, yield, measurement. You don't need to do it in a silo. And thankfully, we have great partners like iHeart and Mynt that will help us not only kind of understand what we're doing, how we can do it better, and we'll show you some case studies of things we've actually been doing together too. But with that said, hopefully that's the most you'll hear from me in the next 40 minutes, and we'll really defer to our amazing panelists here. So let's start with you, Christine. Someone really buying and planning executions in media for advertisers. When you're putting a plan together with audio, like how are you building that from scratch, and how does each, let's say, type of media play into that?
Yeah, I think we look at a couple things when we're looking at audio specifically. First of all, we put our pieces into buckets. So first, broadcast, right? We use broadcast for reach and scale. And as we talk today, and you see our case studies, we're really looking at reaching those folks at the point of purchase. And that's where radio starts. And then we look at podcast, and then we use that to deepen our trust and consideration. And we've heard all weekend, and we will continue to, that the voice and that personal connection with these mediums is very important. And we all hear it on the podcast side, but that also extends into the OG radio side, right? Like the influencers and hosts there. So those two work really well together. And then our streaming adds targeting and increases engagement. And then even on the programmatic line, we're looking at hyper-targeting, zips, and really connecting through data and optimization there. So that's how we start the approach.
So when you're starting the approach too, are you seeing it that maybe different outcomes are relying on different things, hyper-targeting, availability? Are you considering those depending on what KPIs you're searching for?
Yeah, 1,000%. We're looking at every strategy is different. And we look at all of the learnings from years of data that Mynt has collected, and then work with our partners like an iHeart and a Magellan to make sure that strategy is sound for each client.
So on the reverse side, it's from the publisher side of things. So obviously you're, on the implementation end, enabling what Christine and her clients do to do that. How do you see the roles of each kind of audio type in what you're doing and building?
Yeah. So, first of all, I echo your sentiment, Kristen, and thank you for recognizing the capability that audio as a medium has. I feel like we are that one unique medium which actually translates really well across the funnel, right? So if you think about audio in general, we've known for decades at this point in terms of the role radio plays in creating brand awareness, right? So the upper funnel metrics are positive perception changes, so on and so forth. That's the upper funnel. When you think about the mid-funnel, right, you'll also start to see things like conversations. What is mid-funnel? Consideration set. How does consideration become a thing? It's when people are talking about it, right? Who is talking? It's the podcasters, on-air hosts, people you're having human conversations. So you go up from the upper funnel to the mid-funnel, and then, like you rightly said, radio has always been at the point of purchase. The last media you hear right before you turn or walk into your grocery store. The last media you hear when you have undivided attention when you're driving back from work or any other commute, right? So it plays a very unique role, in my opinion, across the entire funnel stack. And I don't think we give ourselves enough credit or remind the marketplace enough to say what role we play. We're not just an upper funnel building mechanism or a tactic or a strategy. Our channel can be utilized across the spectrum. Obviously has to be deployed differently for each KPI being different. What do you need for a bottom funnel versus what do you need for a top funnel is very, very different. But those things exist within our entire media stack within the audio channel. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
So on that note, all right, let's kind of beyond just like one channel, right? We're not just one thing anymore. We're all things. Like you're buying all things, you're selling all things. So Christine, like when you're putting it together, how do you, let's say you're, maybe doing streaming and adding broadcast or vice versa, broadcast adding podcast. How are you putting that together to like affect outcomes, and where do you see that happening?
So I think it depends on the KPIs because every strategy is going to be different. In the case that we're going to talk about today, one of them for a beverage company is they were looking to drive retail sales. That was their main KPI. It is their main KPI. And secondary, they wanted to see a sign of life on the website, just for some directional as well. And so when we were looking at that, we thought, okay, what is going to be that medium that hits them right before the point of purchase? When they're in the car, they're driving to work, they need to go to the gas station. It's available in a gas station. They're coming home from work, going to Target. So we look at that first and foremost, and radio is going to drive that. How do we enforce or reinforce that message? We do that by adding that layer of streaming. We do that by adding that layer of podcasts so that we are reaching that consumer on everything they touch and listen to. And we do that by the data that we get from our partners.
A little bit of a plug. We did a case study with iHeart and SiriusXM and our friends at Ad Results at the end of the year last year. And we found that, adding streaming to podcasting or podcasting to streaming extends reach. So you're not only getting that frequency and that repeated message across people, but then you're also getting 75%, 80% net new listeners to hit them with those messages. So, all right, let's say moving outside of audio too. So Hetal, like you just announced a major partnership with TikTok. Obviously, iHeart is getting into video space more and more. How do you see those other channels plus audio, or adding audio to those things, like enhancing buys and working that?
Before I answer that, can I pile on something that you guys said? So I think
everyone pile on.
I had something to pile too.
You want to go first?
I was going to say it's with the streaming portion as well. It's interesting because, depending on what networks you're partnering with too, like the digital audio is an extension of that brand or that talent or that just the whole market ecosystem in a whole. So if it's, an iHeart or an Odyssey or, one of the radio partners that has that product, it just extends the brand even more into the local markets. And that's something that's really impactful.
Got it. So in vein with that, what I thought was really interesting, and I'll get onto the other media, but even within audio, right? So I want to make this really real for the audience to give an example. Like I was talking about how different audio assets have different strengths, right? One of the things you have to recognize is what we were able to do is, let's say the client has an X budget that they want to hit in, let's say, a holiday quarter. This is a client for who Black Friday sales, Cyber Monday sales mean a super big deal, right? In that instance, if it's a 6-week or an 8-week window and they have X amount of budget to stretch, you can be really thoughtful and meaningful about how you deploy podcasting, streaming, and radio, right? For radio to make a difference, it requires a certain reach and frequency threshold to hit. So the way we would design something like that is you would take digital audio to be that always on base layer for that whole time. And then towards the last 2 to 3 weeks, you create a moment of amplification with a mass reaching vehicle, which is radio. So what we were able to do is create some consideration, trust in the beginning of the first 4 weeks of the campaign, talking about something big that's going to come, something big that's going to happen, or you're going to get a fantastic deal when you're close to Cyber Monday. And then the last week or so, you really run up the scale, create awareness about what that offer is, and drive people in troves to the website in terms of e-commerce. So one, I wanted to give you an example where radio doesn't only play a role in retail. We've seen some phenomenal success on the e-commerce side of the site from an audio full Substack, but also back to your question, and it wasn't just about audio. What we were able to do is, now that we knew that the first 4 weeks were about an always-on base digital audio and podcasting strategy, we used that insight into informing other media strategy. How does their paid search get impacted by what you're doing in the first 2 weeks of your podcasting and streaming? What can be the social message at that time that teases what's going to come during that Black Friday or their Cyber Monday? So true impact or outcome comes from recognizing what role you're playing in the wider media mix of the client, right? Because look, we have to recognize that audio is a portion of the client's budget. There are other medias that have to work in synergy, have to work in tandem for the client's goal to get to where they need to get to. And not to mention, we crushed their goals because having that sort of synergy, being able to make that happen in a time period using the right media for the right things really does drive outcomes and growth for brands.
Well, I think that's a great note, especially it's not just about like, is a media upper funnel, lower funnel. It's tactically, how can we take all of the funnel and put it into our brand kind of approaches?
Yep.
All right, Christine. So on that note, we're talking about like buying across the spectrum, right? We're enhanced buys, getting it going for a while. What are you seeing for like on the buying side where you're scaling an audio investment, like out of a test period into like an always on environment? How are you doing that? Like, how do you see that working? And does that change like tactically what you're doing and buying?
So we look for a couple things. One, we look for signs of life, right? And I think you have to recognize that some of the things that we're doing, they're not those crazy sprints. Things aren't going to happen overnight. So it's really important to find those signs of life and have that clear response and understand that clear response for each channel in its expected ramp up period. So I think that that's what we're gauging, and then we look at the site activity, the store traffic, whatever that is, to make sure that it's on par with what we're seeing. We look at the results and the performance, if we're in an acceptable realm of the KPI, to make sure we can move forward. And then from there, when we start, we want to make sure there's a clear and scalable outcome, that we're not just testing and moving money wherever. So we want to make sure that we hit those points along the way, especially in the beginning for sustainability.
How do you keep your brands patient?
Oh, come on. You just ask them nicely.
All right.
And that works?
Right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Don't answer the calls.
Yeah.
Pass.
Pass.
Pass. All right, let's blame some other people in the room though, instead of ourselves, right? So Hetal, what mistakes are everybody making when they're buying, when they're scaling audio? Like, what are they doing wrong that you're doing better?
I think a very interesting question. I do think that, look, when it comes down to marketing in general, right, it's an art and a science. And oftentimes we get blamed, at least the analytics folks get blamed for being too tactical, being too analytical, being too spreadsheety, and not having enough magic in the science or in the art of marketing, right? But I do think that we've also somewhere brought us to the point where we think dashboards are actually marketing. There's a lot more to the science of marketing than dashboards. Are you looking at the current KPIs? Like, oftentimes I find basic things like reach and frequency is not enough talked about, looked and monitored, right? When thinking about or deduplicated reach and frequency. Like, I'll talk to marketers or clients and they'll say, oh, I'm covered in digital. I have these 3 social media I'm running it on. Or I got audio covered. I'm running it on this X player. And I'm like, well, these 3 different things bring 3 different types of content. One is a live listening content, which is humans talking, not necessarily music oriented. Other is X. Can't say you're covered, right? So I think basic principles, in my opinion, are a little bit running short right now. It would do us all a lot of help if we were able to get to the fundamentals and kind of master those fundamentals a little bit better. Like, why is always on good? Why do you don't panic and turn off your advertising when something happens, whether it's COVID or tariff? Because you know what? It's going to take you 8 weeks to come back if you just stop your advertising for 1 week. So just basic, strong fundamentals of marketing, I think, are missing from a standpoint of us kind of chasing the shiny ideas, and as we should, right? Like, we are in the marketing space, we should come up with cool new things, but not at the cost of the basic fundamentals, in my opinion.
That makes sense. Christine, from the buying side, what do you see mistakes are being made, like in scaling or repurchasing?
So I'm totally agreeing with you. People don't use all the cuts. That you look at a dashboard and then that's it. And we really try to make sure we are slicing and dicing and finding the stories, whether they be good or bad, and then going above and beyond. I think something that's missing that I'm gonna plug Mynt for is we're very transparent with our partners, and I think that is one of the steps of being successful with our clients, our advertisers, is Mynt is transparent with iHeart. We are sharing results with you in order for you to help us. Same thing with Magellan. We are working as a team, and it's not this black box. We're really trying to share, to learn, and grow.
And ultimately, your and our goals are aligned. We both want the client's campaign to succeed. So there is no reason for us to not share and learn together and share the best principles to make sure that it's a success.
Right. Because there have been so many times, more times than none, where I get on a call with Jim or iHeart or anybody, and it's like, hey, I know you're looking at it this way, but how about this way? We saw this trend, we saw this happening. We might not have seen that incrementality there, but we see it, it's not happening in Atlanta or the Southwest, it's happening in the Northeast and things like that. So we really rely on that transparency and collaboration with our partners, so that extends to our advertisers.
So a lot of talk, a lot about buying and scaling, right? But let's move into the measurability side, especially we're talking about cross-channel measurement, measuring all outcomes, sharing measurement. As we're looking at it and kind of look at it, the entire media mix, like Hetal, what do you think, what breaks if you're looking at it individual channels instead of looking at it as like a whole?
So, when you think of measurement framework, right? The way I think about it, so my background for the last 2 decades has been in insights and analytics. So I'm a measurement professional who's being more now front end in terms of educating marketers on how audio can be utilized across the funnel, right? So the way I think about measurement, particularly in audio, but also it kind of goes beyond audio, is think of going from your site analytics, which is your Google Analytics or some form of Adobe Analytics or something of that sort, up to some form of an MTA, right, where you have multiple channels in the mix, up to some form of an MMM. So I'm like kind of layering in terms of what is the gold standard, right? So you go from site analytics to you have some form of MTA, then you go to some form of MMM, right? Like clients will have channel allocation tools that help them decide which channel is driving what impact for them at what dollar value. Where are they oversaturated? So, MMMs will give you demand curves and will give you saturation curves. So it will tell you that you're overspent in this media, and moving $1 from this media to this media can bring you this much more ROI. There's also a fine balance between recognizing efficiency and effectiveness, because sometimes some media might be phenomenally efficient, but not effective. So some of the finer MMM models are looking at it more holistically. But beyond that, you also have, I think, the incrementality test, which I think is my personal favorite. The holdouts and geo-market breaks really allow you to understand what is driving what for you. And I'm a true believer in the power of experimentation, guys. The minute we think that we know everything, I think we've kind of lost the battle. So we have to recognize that there is a lot that we are dealing with. It's evolving, it's changing. And ultimately, you're trying to study human mind and human choice, and it does not come down to a model. So you have to find it in yourself to constantly experiment, challenge your own basic assumptions on which things are built, and it only happens from having systematic pilots run so that we understand, are some of our fundamental assumptions on which we are operating, on which our models are built, true, not true, or changing with time. They may have been true 5 years ago, and they're probably not true today. And so to me, I think it is extremely important to have a measurement stack which kind of, first you should be aware where you're in the measurement stack. Oftentimes I will see partners who will take Google Analytics or some form of an MTA and say, here's what I'm going to decide in terms of channel allocation. At that point, you don't know, individually what one channel is driving for you versus the other. And so there's a lot of the speed at which we grew, we didn't have enough time to catch up on these things. And so I think constantly you see this recurring theme of like someone in the measurement space understands the nuts and bolts, but it hasn't translated over to sometimes the decision makers.
Oh, that makes sense. Christine, I mean, obviously you're very data forward and looking at different cuts, looking at that, like where are you seeing it when you're measuring one thing, just not everything? Like what's breaking on that side of things from like your advertiser end?
I think if you're just looking at one thing or one or two things, it really measurement can get distorted, and that causes us to have our optimizations distorted. A lot of people will see or just look at one thing, and that might be the shiny thing, but in reality, that's really not what's working and moving that forward. It's a combination of things, and so we really try to have that holistic view, and not just gravitate to oh my gosh, a week we were positive. You just have to kind of have that patience and that path forward to make sure we're making the right move.
I love that. I think that point of view, is very refreshing, but also very, very needed in terms of calibration as to where we are. Oftentimes, like, I will have to remind people internally and externally, click is not a sale. Right? Like, and if everything's optimized to that, maybe that's not what you're driving towards. And you're not looking at, to my point, what is efficient versus what is effective.
Right. And that path might take 5 days. It might take 75 days. And for you to make gut reactions just based on one type of view that's insanity.
All right, so let's break into some actual data now. We have some case studies, some things we ran across the board. First one, we're going to toss off Christine with a little bit of background here because it's one of her clients. But let's see if we can click this over if it works. Yeah, all right. So here's some actual delivery data. Christine, this is a premium beverage company that you work with.
I do.
What is our tactic? What is our idea? Why did you buy the way you bought?
Yeah, so we were focusing on retail sales, convenience stores, and then eventually moving into Target and Walmart's. So that was the number one KPI, is see that lift within 12 markets over I think it was like a quarter over Q1. So we are looking at that data. And then the second part of that was, are we seeing signs of life in those markets with web traffic as well? Which was kind of our initial gut check, right? So if you're seeing that increase, eventually that should translate into sales. So we wanted to, we had a few things within our media mix. We had radio, and we had brand spots within that, and we also had influencer spots. We ran 60s, 30s, 15s, very high frequency. And like you said, we kind of had that pulse strategy as well. And then we also had an always on digital audio approach. So that was phase one of the campaign. And
phase one behind us.
Behind us.
You can see, so the light blue is the broadcast. We measured it across the board in partnership with iHeart. So the light blue is our actual broadcast market delivery. Dark blue is the digital. So you can see broadcast, huge delivery. You got huge audience, huge reach frequency. And then we'll show you some results on the next slide. But from the iHeart end, like, I thought, how are you, when you're helping to put these plans together in reach of the goals, like market level, distribution, foot traffic, like how are you approaching this, like to best support?
So,
clients?
First of all, we have a best-in-class media strategy and planning team, right? So, and some of these, it's a closed feedback loop. So what happens is there are, like I said, basic fundamentals of planning. Like, for example, what is your penetration with your target audience in a market? That's going to define what goes on in those places, whether that be the types of podcasts you pick. So if you're picking a list of podcasts, you're saying, okay, I want to go after gamers. Which are the podcasts that most gamers listen to? That's what I'm going to put on this plan. On the radio side of the house, you'd say, okay, which are the stations in the market that the client wants to be, and which of those stations are the highest indexing with gamers. So you start with where the highest concentration of the type of people that you're looking at exist. Then you start thinking about your reach and frequency goal. We have certain basic guidelines in terms of like, for radio as a medium to work, you need at least about 6 to 8 weeks for it to show the impact that you're hoping, because it builds over time. That's how radio listening and reach and frequency builds. So we have certain thresholds based on if it is a new client or it's a new product that's been launched in the market, it's an established product. What is a competitive spend? A lot of those thresholds decide and define what goes into making a good plan, what a good plan looks like, what's the minimum threshold of, gross rating points you need to be able to achieve the impact that you're hoping to achieve. So a ton of that thinking goes into it from that standpoint. And then when we have measurement and when we have success, some of that data again pipes back in to say the last time we ran a campaign with these grips and these places with these podcasts, this is the sort of impact we saw, and then that kind of bakes back into the planning principle, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I think is also extremely important, like I mentioned, I should kind of take my own advice, is I think we have a blueprint and a playbook of what works and what doesn't. But you have to be open to experimenting and understanding that it may not work that way. So we have to have some sort of and Magellan has been an amazing partner in this regard, because I think it's changed how people look at broadcast, because we are for the first time able to see real-time information and make optimizations on the radio side of the house as much as on the digital audio side of the house, right? Most of the marketers or clients were like, well, radio campaigns can be optimized. I'm like, no, now we can, right? Like we can look at data in real time, delivery in real time, and then start to make some mindful decisions. Now, I'm never going to recommend on a daily basis, look at some of this information and move things around, right? But at the same time, if it's an 8-week campaign, you don't want to wait for 8 weeks to say whether it worked or not. So you want to look at it a week in, 2 weeks in, for you to start to recognize, is it delivering in the right day parts? Are certain day parts doing better for my clients' conversions? Maybe I need to double up on that. Am I moving in the right velocity in terms of what I am thinking? If I was going to drive X number of outcomes, week 4, what % of those outcomes I'm at? So having a sense of accountability for your own media, I'm really excited that we are able to do that with some of the Magellan, measurement that we have started to put in place.
Well, even looking at that, so let's talk about some outcomes. So premium beverage company. I know we discussed site traffic, signs of life, right? We can see, again, huge scale, 20 million additional, grimps coming from broadcast, but visitors, huge, not only in volume, but actually broadcast drove twice, visitor per impression effectively was juiced up thanks to our premium beverage company. But so we're looking at Christina, how are you seeing this? How are you using this outcomes to help determine the next phase, and how you're going to either look at these markets, additional markets? How are you heading up because of this?
Yeah, I think first of all, we're always in a testing and learning mentality, and I think that's really important as we move through this, because this is just one cut. The next step here is we're sharing the retail SKUs with you to do matchbacks and really look at what that campaign has done above and beyond this. For us, this is directional as we approach Q2. We're looking at adding podcasts into the mix. So as we're looking at really scaling up in the markets that need it, here's the framework that we have to continue testing and learning with, I think, at a minimal budget risk too. I think that really helps on that side. So that's how we're treating this first round of results is how can we scale this? How can we add podcasts into the mix? A few other mediums, but that's where we're going next.
So this campaign was the Q1. It's currently running. We're measuring actively, but we talk about different outcomes and how we can support it across the funnel. Obviously, beverage company looking for a little bit different thing in retailers. In Q4 with iHeart, we measured a large campaign across broadcast and digital for, let's say, computing giant. When you're putting plans together for computer companies and actual focus on holiday sales pushes, what is the approach from your end to support more of the down funnel KPI?
Well, first, I was using the round, so I'm so glad I noticed that. That's a good start. You can trust me with your media plans. I think three pillars for me in particular for this one client or this one category that I've been really close to in terms of understanding some of the performance driving engine, which is audio. We started with, like I said, target audiences. Who were their target audiences, right? In the transformation journey that we've had this with this particular client, the definition of your target audience was a very interesting journey. They had certain demographic elements of their target audience. They said, here are the people who typically buy computers and laptops and gaming devices, right? Age this, income this, X, Y, and Z. What we were able to do is then, based on some of our listening trends and looking at those people and those demographic, we were actually able to pinpoint some psychographic elements of those people. So for example, let's say one of the target audiences is SMB. And from based on some proprietary research that we've done in-house, what we were able to find is SMBs love AI, but are very scared of AI. Now, every computer company is today talking about AI. My computer is enabled with AI. How does this brand now grasp that insight and own that insight and make that a part of their campaign, right? So what we started to recognize or kind of get into is saying, here's your target audience. Here's something psychographically that you know about your audience now outside of the demographic that they are. Can we use that insight into the second pillar, which is the creative? Now, what can I take in from understanding that audience and pipe that into the creative? How can we bring ease? How can we communicate the benefits of AI to an SMB in the creative was key to this campaign. So that's the second thing that we brought in. And the first pillar is understanding your audiences, not just demographically, but beyond them. These are real humans you're trying to influence. So knowing a little bit about them outside of just their age and geography and zip code could be very, very valuable. The second pillar, which is creative, we kind of started to say, okay, we understand the fear that's driving this audience right now. That's a value add your brand is wanting to offer to them. We helped with our studio, our internal audio experts to come up with the right creative, with the right call to action, an emotional hook, which, by the way, extremely important if people in this audience already don't know. Like somewhere in the short-termism, we lost the emotional connect in our storytelling and in our creative. We exist today as a medium because of that power we have over a lot of other competing channels. And so we should own that emotional aspect of that creative and always hold on. So that was the second pillar. And then the third was measurement, right? So I loved what you said is early signs, or what was the phrase you used? I really liked it. Like you look for signs of life.
Signals,
right?
Signals of life.
So
Signs
yeah,
of
so
life.
early indicators is the approach to go by because you don't immediately sometimes see, while you see the traffic go up, you don't know how much you're driving versus your competitors driving or other media is driving. So we started to look at some proxy signals that start to help us understand what was happening. For example, search data in Google Trends. That started to show the first sign of life and say, oh, you ran this in this DMA, I'm seeing the search spike, right? And so that started to open up doors for us to talk to the client and say, are you seeing something improve in your search? Because I am seeing something here. And then that allowed us to dig into a little bit more. So I think thinking about those pillars, which is who is your audience, what is the creative, and what is the value proposition you're offering from a benefit standpoint, and lastly, how are you measuring your outcomes so that you understand, did you honestly drive a sale or not? And what role did your media play in driving that sale?
You couldn't make my transitions easier. We're talking about, how we're measuring it. Well, here's how we measured it too. So some more immediate outcomes, kind of at a top level. Again, the scale of radio in Q4, ridiculous. 1.3 billion impressions. Like that is just a massive amount of reach that you're getting just in the market. And what we saw was really interesting here. So on a per user visitor basis, or like a purchase per impression, the digital signals, podcasts and streaming, it killed it on a percentage basis. Broadcast, the percentage looks lower, but again, at that scale, it's not. And the real volume play here is twofold. One, purchasers, when you actually visited, you were more likely coming from radio to actually buy. And the biggest factor here is it's not only it is an efficient medium, but also it's a volume medium. So more than 3 times the amount of purchases came from broadcast as far as a volume basis goes. So in concert, these two things together were, again, driving awareness and driving actual down funnel purchases.
Yep.
All right. So we're going to kind of wrap it up in a little bit here. A few kind of things as we're looking beyond. So we're doing a lot now. We're changing the game. We're constantly coming in here, measuring more, communicating more, and being more transparent across the funnel. But what else do you see from like a measurement standpoint? Where else are you going? Where are we taking this? Where do you want this to be going?
Like I said, I'm extremely passionate in general about measurement as a space. I do think that there is a lot of, what do you call it? Walled gardens make it really hard to be a part of the mix. But I know there are a lot of cross-industry initiatives which are really starting to like kind of peak, being able to look at media across. MMM, I think clients have started to recognize is extremely important because that somewhere puts it on the level playing field across every channel that they're measuring. The problem with MMM, which most of you already know, is takes really long and it's very expensive, right? So it's cost prohibitive and it takes really long. Like finding out if something works 6 months later is a tad bit too late for me to do something about it, right? So unless you are a well-oiled machine who's been doing it for 5 years and you're just kind of changing up your allocation or mix investment little, MMM kind of becomes pointless. I would also be a little bit careful about those plug and play AI driven MMMs. Like since AI and laptops became a thing, everyone's come up with a new MMM. So that also is a little bit nerve wracking, especially as a measurement expert on the other side. I hear a new name pop up every third day. I was like, oh God, this call's going to be fun. Now I have to learn what their model is, what they're waiting in there. And then I kind of go back to square one, right? So I think it's unfortunately going to get a little worse before it gets a little better. And that's the only way we've learned as humans. So I think that's the trajectory we're going to follow. But I am seeing some really smart marketers finally sniff up and understand, ultimately, my focus and my clarity is my sales. Are my sales moving? To your point, with a little bit of patience and a little bit of understanding beyond that one click, beyond that one view, I've used X media for the last 3 quarters. Overall, is my business good in the last 3 quarters? I may not see that in my dashboard in this line item 347. But what does it feel like? At some point, mixing those signals with your immediate optimization is where I'm seeing some of the smart marketers go. But I'm going to say one of the biggest changing things for us as an industry this year is going to be the real timeliness of measurement that we are finally going to be able to do at scale. Because I think for a really long time, we took the time to educate the industry that audio can do everything that digital can do. And I think we are finally at that moment. We can do it and we can do it at scale. We just got to keep doing and keep repeating the message and kind of, socialize that a little bit more and put it to work.
So as we're measuring more in real time, like how are you using it, Christine, to like actually like measure outcomes and optimize and like in campaign, let alone for future campaigns?
Yeah, we look at it to, certain things like tightening the market mix or allowing us to target certain geos, things like that. But it helps us to design smarter cross-platform media buys and plans and strategies. And it's not we're looking down the line, right? Like we're not looking at next week and seeing what we should do. We're trying to use the data and the measurement and trust the validity and the measurement and our partners to make those long-term decisions versus those gut reactions.
And so when you're doing that, I guess, versus making gut reactions, obviously, having measured and been buying for a long time, there was always your own gut feeling, your own methodology, your own things. But like now that you're expanding, doing more measurement, like what's the benefit and like how does it help to use, let's say, a party solution or outside channels to get bigger insights?
Well, I will tell you that I thought my gut was always right, and it's not. So you've humbled me. But no, it allows us to, we can replace channels quicker. We can see what's working. We can see what's kind of working. And I think that it allows us to take some of the risk out of it and just provide more trust to our clients that we know what we're doing. And it's not just that like, hey, I've been in radio for 30 years or I've been in measurement forever. No, we have real partners, we have real results, we have repeatable results that we can scale, not just with one partner, but with the 30 out there right now that we have learnings for. So,
can I pile on that? Even as a publisher, I think you're starting to see like this. I'd love to hear from you guys, and you can nod your head because I think all of y'all don't have a mic. But we are seeing media kind of, amalgamate, right? So you're starting to see like podcasters going on Netflix, then on YouTube, podcasting become films, films become podcasting. So we're at this very interesting moment right now where media is kind of aggregating, which is why I think it is important for third-party players, because at some point, you're going to see consolidation in media. You're going to see a lot of cross-media activations, partnerships, like we launched TikTok and iHeartMedia last night, right? So there's going to be a TikTok channel that's going to have, those podcasters launching their own radio station. So now you're seeing a social media becoming a radio channel in some markets and big markets. So my point is you're going to see a lot of that happen. And I think it started with podcasting going on YouTube first. And all of a sudden, as an industry, I think 2 years ago, we were like, is podcasting now video, right? So we were at that moment 2 years ago. And so now is podcasting social because TikTok is becoming radio? So my point is you're going to see a lot of these mix across different media, which is why having third-party vendors allows you to still have that church and state, but still able to measure the impact and outcome effectively.
As long as people keep asking me if a video is a podcast, like we're going to be okay though. So that one, we're never leaving that question behind. All right, we're coming in here for a landing, but I guess put you on the spot a little bit.
I'm ready.
What's one question that, marketers should ask their audio partners tomorrow?
Ooh. I would say, I think, put us accountable. Ask us, how can you drive growth for us and show us, right? Like, I love a good challenge, but I think we got to come at it as partners. We got to be transparent, to your point. Give a challenge. Let's work together and see if we can make it or break it.
Oh, that's great. All right, Flip. What's one question that audio partners should ask their marketers?
Who's grading your homework, and what are you doing to make the ecosystem that we are working in valid? And how are you helping us? How are we working together? And is it outside of that black box? Again, I'm going back to that transparency. Are we going to be collaborative partners and really work together, or are we going to be siloed? Because if it's siloed, I don't think that's going to work.
I love that. I think that's a very good place to push the partners. We go further when we work together, right? So I think that makes perfect sense. And that's how we will, as an industry, demand the share for audio as an industry in the budgets that we deserve, because we do drive an outcome. But I think there is an awareness problem. I think there's a storytelling problem. And the more we work together with our partners to socialize that, the better off we'd all be.
1,000%.
Hey, that's it for us. We did it. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Huge thank you to Christine from Mynt and Hetal from iHeartMedia. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
And thanks to Sounds Profitable and the whole group. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
All right, y'all. Make some noise for my friends one more time. My sweet baby Jesus, y'all suck. But it is okay because it's lunchtime. I need you all to go grab food. We're going to be back here at 2:30. 2:30, be back here. In the meantime, please feel free to connect with your friends, do all of the things, because we are coming back here with the heat at 2:30. 2:30. I'll see you all then.
Fire, burning.